Hello and welcome everyone. We're excited to be here today to talk a bit about building social impact solutions for the nonprofit sector. As you can see, I'm here in my home office, blue shirt in front of my trusted plants. My name is Michael Tjalve. I'm a Director of Innovation of the Tech for Social Impact team. I lead a small team focused on innovation and data engineering for the nonprofit sector. I have the honor of being joined here today by my colleague, Erik Lucht. Do you want to introduce yourself, Erik?
Thank you. My name is Erik Lucht. I'm a project manager architect on Michael's team. For the last 3 years, I've worked primarily as a cloud solution architect in the data space. And so it's my pleasure to join Michael today. You can see I have, for those of you joining without video today, you wouldn't see my glasses and my beard and my lovely blue shirt. But I'm happy to be joining you. And for those of you who can see, you would see the Bellevue background behind me. And that is actually just Teams projecting that. I'm joining you guys from Fargo, North Dakota, very close to the Great Lakes. So thanks for having us.
Excellent. So we're hoping that what we discussed today may give you some ideas for what to focus on during the hackathon. And we'll make sure to leave time for questions at the end in case you have anything you want to go more deeply into. So we're living in a changed world, accelerated by COVID-19. Rapid advances in technology are drastically changing how people live, work, and learn. And while there's great potential for technology to help address society's biggest issues, billions of people are still at risk of being excluded from the social and economic opportunities of the future, and society as a whole is at risk of missing their collective potential. And so as we're confronted with inequitable access to economic opportunity, with persistent fundamental rights issues around the world, an urgent climate crisis, and diminishing trust in technology, it's important that we ensure that everyone has access to the benefits and opportunities of technology and to the digital economy. And then it's important that we apply technology and innovations to address these challenges without sacrificing core values like trust, privacy, transparency, and inclusion. So the question is not what can technology do, but what should it do? Technology is a powerful source for empowering people and organizations. We know that technology isn't the whole answer, but we also know that new models for incorporating digital technology into mission and operations are needed to weather the current storm and assist with recovery. We are a small engineering team within Microsoft Philanthropies called Tech for Social Impact. We work on accelerating nonprofit innovation and deliver solutions that help nonprofit organizations work more efficiently and amplify their impact. Our team delivers technology to nonprofit organizations, humanitarian organizations, and NGOs all around the world. And at the core of our strategy to help organizations meet these increasing demands is the Microsoft Cloud for Nonprofit. It connects the nonprofit infrastructure with integrated and intelligent capabilities by bringing together disparate data from across the organization. It allows nonprofits to realize the true value of the data to accelerate mission outcomes. It brings together our trusted cloud capabilities into a common platform aligned to sector best practices and supporting the most common organizational scenarios. So these include things like helping organizations understand their donors and supporters to drive fundraising and engagement, improving how organizations deliver programs, including mobilizing volunteers, as well as helping organizations accelerate mission outcomes by realizing the full value of the data to gain critical mission insights. And finally, building security into the heart of everything we do. So let's take a look at what sits underneath the work we do. First, we start with our own offering, combining them into a single Microsoft cloud designed to remove the friction points. They consist of Microsoft Azure, Microsoft 365, Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform brought together with the Power Platform. It's a comprehensive offering of connected industry-leading clouds, specifically built to optimize digital feedback loops. So how does the Microsoft Cloud work together? Yeah, well, you can think of Azure as knowing or understanding your data, Dynamics and the Power Platform as doing or acting upon it with a business process, and Microsoft 365 as sharing and collaborating across stakeholders. And core to our innovation approach is building end-to-end solutions, creating a unified, secure, and scalable infrastructure for nonprofit organizations. And so if we look at the logical architecture of the Microsoft Cloud for Nonprofit, we can see by leveraging Dataverse and the common data model you see here at the bottom, it's designed to break down silos between applications and data stores, providing an integrated experience. However, the real power lies in the broader ecosystem of partners. Building on top of the core capabilities we make available, we have an extended community of ISVs, system integrators, social entrepreneurs, and more, who are building vertical-specific solutions, bespoke nonprofit solutions, which truly amplify the impact of the nonprofit sector. Let's take a closer look at the common data model here towards the bottom. So a common data model, it's a set of standardized, extensible data schemas that represent commonly used concepts and activities. It helps with sharing of data across organizations, and it helps eliminate data silos within an organization. You can see on the left here an example of an ERD, or an entity relationships diagram, that is a structural diagram for database design with major entities and interrelationships amongst those entities. So 3 years ago, we invited nonprofits, private foundations, government agencies, and other tech partners to come together to work on creating a common data model for the nonprofit sector. So as the foundation of a new wave of innovation that is community-led, open source, and representative of sector best practices, it's a platform agnostic model that's published open source on GitHub. And today it represents a platform agnostic set of entities, attributes, and relationships that describe many of the most common core scenarios for the nonprofit sector. It's a repeatable set of best practices represented in a data schema, and it's at the center of everything we do for the sector and with the sector. So it makes it easier for our partners to innovate and to share data, and it's built specifically with and for the nonprofit sector as a standard structure, as a common language for representing data entities that encourages interoperability across platforms and solutions. And so with that, I will hand it over to Erik to talk about some of the specific hackathon challenges we've laid out for all of you. Erik, over to you.
Thanks, Michael. So as I had mentioned in my earlier intro, for the last few years, I've worked as a cloud data architect, specifically in the data space, and very specifically with our nonprofit customers. I've covered 24 time zones globally, and in that time, I've probably spoken to between 300 and 400 of the largest nonprofits, very specifically about their data needs. These customers would include organizations like the United Nations, the Salvation Army, International Red Cross, Danish Rescue Council, Save the Children, Doctors Without Borders, just to name a few. And while these organizations vary in their technical maturity, their cloud presence, and their amount of specialization of their technical staff, they all largely share the same goals from the data perspective. First of all, how do we get better insights from our data? Then how do we get the right data to the right people at the right time to make valid business decisions off of it? And how do we utilize advancements in technology, specifically things like ML and AI, to help us make more effective decisions, predictive versus descriptive reporting? And then how do we go forward and augment our staff? So with these goals in mind, Michael and I came up with the following 5 challenges, and I'll step through these on the following pages. So Michael, could you advance to the next slide?
Yes.
So the first challenge is nonprofit organizations are often soft targets for bad actors. Misinformation hampers mission delivery of the frontline workers. Build a solution to help detect and/or counter misinformation. So sadly, in the last year, we've seen that not only are nonprofits a target, but they're actually more targeted than many other organizations. It seems like we see these kinds of headlines in the news every day. We know that there's fake news. We know it's influencing a large number of people. In fact, it seems like in many cases, we just don't even know which news to trust anymore. Microsoft has made some significant investments in this space in the last couple of years to help identify misinformation in electronic media. One of these technology packages, for instance, is the Video Authenticator, produced in cooperation with Reality Defender. This software helps identify deepfake videos, photos, and audio. Microsoft is also partnering with the BBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and the New York Times on something called Project Orion, where we would embed these similar types of technology to validate news sources right directly at the source that we're getting our news from. In this challenge, you're asked to build a solution to help combat this misinformation. As an example of a reference architecture we've used in the past, you can see in the bottom right, I have some architecture we'd used for a Twitter sentiment analysis project. This isn't necessarily an indication of something that you have to use, just something that we've used in the past. And for those of you kind of unfamiliar with the Microsoft icons, in this architecture, we're basically ingesting a feed from Twitter using Azure Logic Apps, feeding it to an Azure function, and then leveraging both Azure Cognitive Services and machine learning to analyze that feed, then move it off to storage and reporting through Power BI. So Michael, you can go to the next slide. Challenge number 2, effective use of data is critical to nonprofit organizations' digital transformation. Build a solution to manage data across stakeholders, leveraging the Power Platform's low-code tools and the common data model for nonprofits. So again, I've used a slide that is just kind of a generic example of what our data landscape looks like in the Azure platform. This one in particular is essentially kind of a very basic cloud data warehouse. But you could easily imagine like a SQL database or another internal data source sitting in this landscape. Since we're focused in this case on using Power Platform and Common Data Model, I've specifically called those out as components here. And I've highlighted 3 areas that are common sources of data ingress and egress. So looking just in the very center, the green icon is the icon for Microsoft Dataverse, and you can see I have that labeled the nonprofit common data model. Directly below that is probably the easiest method of moving data in and out of our data stack, and Azure Data Lake for any data management solution is going to be a key component. Paired with that is Azure Data Share, which through scheduled tasks allows you to move data both internal to different data sources in your Azure tenant, as well as across tenant if you're looking at sharing data externally. On the far right, we also have the Power BI tool that I have highlighted. As advancements and feature sets have grown inside the Power BI tool, this is a great source for sharing and managing data management, both through ETL functions like Power BI data flows, as well as data sharing technology, both through scalable reporting, internal and external to your organization, as well as shared data sets, and more specifically and more recently through shared data sets externally through the XMLA endpoint functionality. This basically changes those shared data sets in Power BI to shared data sets to any reporting tool, just basically through HTTPS endpoint. And then, of course, as we're focused on our low-code, no-code solution, I've also included Power Apps, where you can share and modify data through portal applications. So I think you can continue on to the next slide, Michael. Challenge number 3. Nonprofit organizations have expressed a desire to integrate more AI capabilities into their workflows, build a mobile app that leverages Azure Cognitive Services to make the lives of frontline workers easier. As a data person, this is one of the areas of Microsoft technology that I just love. Cognitive services, when I show these to our customers, they border on being almost magical. These are all pre-trained models that our product engineering teams have built, but the types of things that they do are really just amazing. And this would be things like on-the-fly language translation, key entity tagging in video, pictures, or text, sentiment analysis of text, text-to-speech, and that would also include new advancements like our neural network text-to-speech that basically produces a text-to-speech model that's virtually indistinguishable from a real person speaking. This is one of the areas that we can use the power of ML to enhance the skill set of our non-for-profit staff and volunteers. In the architecture diagram that I have here, this is a diagram from a project that I worked on with a human services organization. They were using cognitive services to do sentiment analysis based on verbal feedback from their human services customers. What this allowed them to do was take, of course, with permission of their customers, but basically take video transcription of responses to set questions, transcribe that to text, and then use sentiment analysis to basically get a happiness score. And for a human services organization, this allowed them to then, over time, get an empirical happiness score on the services that they're providing their customers. So really interesting insights. And so again, just an example of a type of project that we used in this space previously. So you can go to the next one, Michael. Challenge number 4. Better flow of critical information improves efficiency of mission delivery and beneficiary engagement. Develop a Power Virtual Agent chatbot template that nonprofit organizations with similar use cases can pick up and adapt with targeted content. So this is another area where we're looking at the power of AI and the cloud to augment the needs of staff. Again, I have some sample architecture up here, and again, this will be very similar to the example of Azure architecture that I had showed in a previous slide. Very specifically, this just shows where the Power Virtual Agent plugs into this, and you can see that it's using Microsoft Dataverse as the data backend, but you can also see that plugs into the greater technology stack. An example of where Microsoft used this technology in the last year was with the Microsoft Healthcare COVID bot. Microsoft basically provided a very quick to deploy Power Virtual Agent template that was available to healthcare providers so that incoming patients could essentially go through the healthcare bot, go through a series of question and answers to identify if they had COVID symptoms, what's the appropriate next best step to take, and then it very quickly piped them off to a healthcare provider should they need that further intervention. And so that's a great example of how we can scale this kind of AI to really augment a large number of staff. And you can go on to the next slide, Michael. And challenge number 5, this is our last challenge. Nonprofit organizations have access to a range of internal and external data sets, but they often don't fully understand what's in the data. Develop a solution based on Microsoft Cloud technologies that allow nonprofits to gain insight into the content and/or suggested usage of available data sets. This is a massive problem in the non-for-profit space. I would venture to say that this remains a massive problem across all industries. A common nonprofit organization has between 15 and 30 separate data sources. They need to find a way to aggregate this data to make it more available for access and for reporting. They need governance to make sure that the right people get access to the right data at the right time. And conversely, they need to make sure that people that shouldn't see it don't. They need to do this in a way that makes the data both relevant and actionable to the individuals who are making business decisions, and mostly just through making this available with some speed. With the release of Azure Purview to general availability, many of these capabilities are much closer to our non-for-profit customers. Tools like cognitive search, Bing API, and Bing custom search are also useful to help customers find the data that they need in their organization's data landscape. Tools like Power Query, that's now available in Azure Data Factory, makes merging data significantly easier. This challenge is focused on building a solution that makes this technology an achievable goal for our non-for-profit customers. And I think you can go to the next slide, Michael.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Erik. Thanks for the overview. I hope you've found some interest and excitement around the 5 challenges we've laid out for you. I definitely see those 5 challenges as being critically important in terms of delivering something that provides real value for the nonprofit sector. And they, the way we've described them, there should be enough opportunity to sort of really make it your own and build something that sort of leverages your assets, your expertise, while providing real value for the sector. So we have time for a few questions. Let's see, we have a few questions coming in here. So one for you, Erik, you kind of touched on this already, but question, are we required to use the architecture provided?
Absolutely not. So the goal of providing the architecture that I did in our slides was just to give some examples of what we have done in the past. It's really just to get the creative juices flowing. The great thing about Microsoft is that we provide really granular, powerful services, but there's no set method for plugging the Legos together. Feel free to build as you see fit to make just really cool solutions.
Perfect. Yes. Let's see. Can we build on top of existing architecture, tools, and products? Yes, definitely yes. Anything you can use of what you've seen on some of the architecture illustrations Erik presented here, of existing architecture, some of the tools and products and services, by all means, build on top of those, leverage those, and add to that. So yeah, definitely yes. Let's see, another question. Erik, here's one for you. Are we restricted to only use Azure products?
So I think that there are some restrictions there. We're encouraging you to build in the Azure cloud, but there are lots of open source technologies that are available. If you start moving into the notebook space, for instance, there's almost an infinite selection of Python libraries that have all kinds of cool AI capability. By all means, feel free to include those in your solution, but we're encouraging you to build in the Azure cloud as the base infrastructure and base tool sets.
Perfect. Let's see, one more.
Michael, there is actually a question in chat here as well. What's the difference between, so it says number 1 and number 5. I think it's actually question number 2 and number 5. If an org wants to ingest different data sources, wouldn't they want to move everything to CDM and be able to aggregate the data versus just aggregating the data in a data lake? And so let me speak to that just for a second. So architecturally, for our customers who are not super familiar with the technology, data lake is just a storage location. You can think of it as, it's similar to like a NAS, like a big network storage. It's super inexpensive, it's super fast, infinitely extensible, but it's just storage. It's secure storage, it's stored in file hierarchy, but it doesn't necessarily provide any intelligence on top of that. And so some of the challenges that our nonprofits face would be, first of all, just bringing all of that data together into a common location. Data Lake definitely achieves that. The next step is to start aggregating that data so we can start reporting off of it commonly. And that's step number 2. And then those things are both really addressed. I believe it's in challenge number 2, which is we're basically asking for solution to help manage this kind of data modeling, specifically with low-code tools and common data model for nonprofits. And then further on, we're asking about how do we find the information in that data, and that's a little bit different challenge. Once we have all the data in the same place, we need to be able to identify how many opioid deaths did we have in 2015? What's the correct data set to give us that information? And so that's really what that other challenge is about. Once we have the data in the same place, how do we scale through finding the data that we need quickly and getting it to the right people? So I hope that answers the question.
Good, thanks, Erik. And yeah, I just want to second that as well. As you can see, many of these challenges, they sort of build on each other. They are related one way or another. And those two in particular, getting access to data, being able to manage data and share the data across organizations or across teams within an organization, gets you access to the data. But it's what happens after that, what you can do with the data, that's where you gain the insights. And so one enables the other in this particular case. Let's see other questions. Should the resulting solution be open source? So there's no requirement for that to be open source, but it's definitely encouraged if you're able and willing to make the solution you end up with as part of the Hackathon project, to make that available as an open source solution that others can pick up and build upon. Let's see what else. Will you be available to help if we have questions later? Yes, definitely. Erik and I will be available, and we certainly expect there to be questions as you start to get start to get working on this. So you're definitely welcome to field questions, send questions our way.
In fact, that's encouraged.
That is encouraged, yes.
As a cloud architect, I like to think of myself as the king of half-baked ideas. So bring your half-baked ideas and I'd be happy to talk through them with you. Be
forewarned though, any of these challenges we are keenly interested in going deeply into discussion about. So yes.
And folks that are viewing the recording, you can always leave Erik and Michael a note for them in the BF 2030 general channel, and we will be sure that it gets routed to them, and we will connect you to these two wonderful gentlemen.
Perfect.
That'd be our pleasure.
All right, I think that's all we have. So I can move on to the end here.
Thank you very much for joining us today for today's Enabling the Nonprofit Sector session with Erik Lucht and Michael Tjalve. Please take a look at these materials available to you to learn more about the Build for 2030 campaign. Thank you all very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.